Life in a medieval village. Nono Umasi. The medieval period, spanning roughly from the 5th to the late 15th century CE, was a transformative era in European history. It succeeded the fall of the Western Roman Empire and preceded the dawn of the Renaissance and the Age of Discovery. Characterized by feudalism, the rise of the Christian Church, and the establishment of monarchies, this epoch witnessed significant social, political, and economic changes. Villages, which were the heart of medieval life, played a pivotal role in shaping the cultural and economic landscape of this period. Villages were the fundamental units of rural society in medieval Europe, serving as the primary residence for the majority of the population. They were centers of agricultural production, which was the backbone of the medieval economy. These villages were not just clusters of houses, but complex communities with their own social hierarchies, customs, and governance systems. The inhabitants, mainly peasants, lived under the authority of local lords, who controlled the land and collected taxes and rents. The village was also a place where people shared resources, collaborated in agricultural tasks, and participated in communal activities, creating a tightly knit community bound by mutual dependence and shared traditions. The purpose of this book is to provide an in-depth exploration of life in a medieval village, uncovering the daily routines, social structures, and cultural practices that defined the lives of its inhabitants. The book is structured to cover various aspects of village life, including the layout and architecture of medieval villages, the roles and responsibilities of different members of the community, the agricultural practices that sustained them, and the festivals and religious observances that punctuated their year. By delving into historical records, archaeological findings, and contemporary accounts, this book aims to paint a comprehensive picture of medieval village life, offering readers a window into the past and a deeper understanding of the foundations of modern rural society. Village structure and governance, the feudal system and social classes. The feudal system was the cornerstone of medieval society, shaping the social structure and governance of villages. This hierarchical system was based on the exchange of land for military service and allegiance. At the top of the hierarchy was the king, who granted large tracts of land to powerful nobles and lords in exchange for their loyalty and military support. These nobles, in turn, parceled out land to lesser lords and knights, who also pledged their service. At the bottom of the social hierarchy were the peasants, who worked the land and provided food and services to their lords. Within the peasant class, there were distinctions between serfs, who were bound to the land and under the lord's control, and freemen, who had more freedom and could own or rent land. Layout of a typical medieval village. A typical medieval village was organized around a central open area known as the village green or common, which served as a communal space for gatherings and livestock grazing. The village was surrounded by agricultural fields, pastures, and forests, which provided the resources necessary for the villagers' sustenance. Houses were usually clustered together and constructed from local materials such as wood, wattle and daub, or stone. Each house often had a small garden for growing vegetables and herbs. Essential structures included a church, a blacksmith's forge, a mill, and sometimes a marketplace or a tavern. Roads and pathways connected the village to neighboring settlements and trade routes. The manor and its significance. The manor was the focal point of a medieval village, serving as the residence of the lord and the administrative center of the estate. It typically included the lord's house, which was often a fortified manor house or castle, and various outbuildings such as barns, stables, and workshops. The manor lands, or domain, were worked by the peasants, who owed labor and produce to the lord. The manor was not only a place of residence, but also a symbol of the lord's power and authority over the village. It played a crucial role in the economic and social life of the community, acting as the hub of agricultural production and the seat of local governance. the lord of the manor, and feudal obligations. The lord of the manor wielded significant power and influence over the village and its inhabitants. In return for the land granted to him by a higher noble or the king, the lord was responsible for maintaining order, administering justice, and protecting his tenants. He collected rents and taxes from the peasants, who also owed him a certain number of days of labor each year, known as corvée. In times of conflict, the lord could call upon the villagers to provide military service. The lord's obligations extended to providing support to the higher nobility, including military aid and financial contributions. Village governance and the manorial court. Village governance was largely administered through the manorial court, which was presided over by the lord or his appointed steward. The manorial court handled a variety of matters, including disputes between villagers, breaches of local customs, and minor criminal offenses. It also oversaw the allocation and use of communal resources, such as common land and water rights. The court was an essential institution for maintaining order and enforcing the feudal obligations of the villagers. It provided a forum for resolving conflicts and ensuring that the village operated smoothly according to the customs and laws of the time. Roles of serfs, peasants, and freemen. The roles and status of villagers varied significantly within the feudal system. Serfs were bound to the land and under the direct control of the lord, with limited personal freedoms. They worked the lord's domain and their own small plots, providing labor and a portion of their produce as rent. Peasants, while also subject to the lord's authority, could sometimes own or rent land and had more autonomy than serfs. Freemen had the most freedom within the village hierarchy. They could own land outright, move freely, and engage in trade. Despite their higher status, freemen were still subject to the manorial court and owed certain duties to the lord. Together, these different classes formed a complex web of interdependent relationships that underpinned the functioning of the medieval village. Daily life in a medieval village, daily routines and household responsibilities. Life in a medieval village was dictated by the rhythms of nature and the agricultural calendar. Villagers rose with the sun and went to bed at dusk, their routines closely aligned with daylight hours. The day typically began with morning prayers, followed by a simple breakfast. Men and older boys headed to the fields to work on tasks such as plowing, sowing, and harvesting, depending on the season. Women managed household duties, which included preparing meals, cleaning, making clothes, and tending to the garden and livestock. Meals were simple and often monotonous, consisting mainly of bread, porridge, and vegetables, with occasional meat or fish. Lunch, eaten around midday, was the main meal, and dinner, taken at sunset, was lighter. In the evenings, villagers might gather for communal activities or to discuss village matters. Despite the hard work, social interaction and communal cooperation were essential aspects of daily life, reinforcing the strong sense of community. Gender roles and family life. Gender roles in medieval villages were clearly defined and adhered to traditional expectations. Men were primarily responsible for agricultural labor and tasks requiring physical strength, such as plowing fields, building structures, and maintaining tools. They also played prominent roles in village governance and decision-making. Women, on the other hand, managed the household and were integral to the domestic economy. They prepared food, brewed ale, made clothing, and cared for children. In addition, women often assisted with lighter agricultural tasks like weeding, harvesting, and tending to small animals. Family life was the cornerstone of the village social structure. Marriages were typically arranged to strengthen familial or economic ties. Large families were common, as children were seen as valuable labor resources. Despite their distinct roles, men and women worked together to ensure the family's survival and well-being. The household was a collaborative unit where every member, including children, had specific duties contributing to the overall functioning of the home and farm. Childhood and education in the village. Childhood in a medieval village was markedly different from modern notions of this life stage. From an early age, children were expected to contribute to the household and farm work. Young children helped with simple tasks such as fetching water, collecting firewood, and tending animals. As they grew older, boys learned agricultural skills from their fathers, while girls were taught household chores by their mothers. Formal education was rare for peasant children. Literacy and schooling were privileges typically reserved for the children of nobles or the clergy. Informal education, however, was a crucial part of village life. Children learned practical skills and knowledge through observation and participation in daily activities. Moral and religious education was provided by the church, with children attending services and participating in religious festivals and rites. Some villages had informal schools run by the parish priest, where children could learn basic reading and writing skills, especially for those destined for the clergy or more skilled trades. Despite the lack of formal education, the skills and values imparted through daily life and communal activities were essential for the survival and continuity of the village community. Agriculture and economy. Farming techniques and crop rotation agriculture was the backbone of medieval village life, with most villagers engaged in farming to sustain their families and fulfill their feudal obligations. Farming techniques during this period were relatively rudimentary, but effective within the constraints of available technology. The most common method was the open field system, where large fields were divided into strips and farmed communally. Villagers were allocated strips in different fields to ensure an equitable distribution of fertile and less fertile land. A crucial innovation in medieval agriculture was the practice of crop rotation. This involved dividing the arable land into 3 sections: one for winter crops such as wheat or rye, one for spring crops like barley or oats, and one left fallow to recover fertility. This 3-field system significantly improved soil health and increased agricultural productivity, as it allowed for continuous cultivation while preventing soil exhaustion. The fallow field was often grazed by livestock, whose manure helped fertilize the soil. Livestock and animal husbandry livestock played a vital role in the medieval village economy, providing essential resources such as meat, milk, wool, and leather, as well as labor for plowing and transport. Common livestock included cattle, sheep, pigs, goats, and chickens. Animal husbandry practices were integrated with crop farming, as animals grazed on fallow fields and provided manure to enrich the soil. Cattle and horses were particularly valuable for their ability to pull plows and carts, making them crucial for both agricultural and transportation purposes. Sheep were prized for their wool, which was spun into yarn and woven into cloth, a significant source of income for many villages. Pigs, which required less care and could forage for food in forests, were a primary source of meat. Villagers also kept chickens for eggs and meat, and goats for milk and cheese. The management of livestock required knowledge and skill, including breeding practices, seasonal care, and disease prevention. These animals were essential not only for sustenance, but also for economic stability and growth within the village. The village commons and shared resources. The village commons was a critical aspect of medieval rural life, representing land and resources shared by the entire community. Common land typically included pastures for grazing livestock, woodlands for gathering firewood and building materials, and sometimes water sources like rivers or ponds for fishing. The commons were managed collectively by the villagers, with established rules and customs to ensure fair use and prevent overexploitation. The use of the commons fostered a strong sense of community and cooperation among villagers. Access to these shared resources was vital for those who owned little or no private land, allowing them to sustain their families and participate in the village economy. The commons also provided a safety net during times of scarcity, offering additional resources that could be tapped into during difficult seasons or poor harvests. Effective management of the commons was essential to maintain its productivity and availability for future generations. Markets, trade, and barter system. Economic activity in a medieval village extended beyond subsistence farming, encompassing local markets, trade, and barter systems. Weekly or seasonal markets were central to village life, where villagers could buy and sell goods, including surplus crops, livestock, crafts, and household items. These markets provided a venue for social interaction and economic exchange, linking the village to broader regional and sometimes international trade networks. Barter was a common method of exchange in the village economy, particularly for transactions involving smaller items or services. Villagers traded goods and labor directly, relying on mutual trust and established relationships. For example, a farmer might exchange a portion of his harvest for blacksmithing services or trade wool for pottery. Money, though less common among peasants, played a role in larger transactions and interactions with merchants from outside the village. Coins were used to pay rents, taxes, and fines, and to purchase goods that were not locally available. Some villages were located near trade routes or had access to local fairs, where merchants brought goods from distant places including spices, textiles, and tools, further integrating the village economy with the wider medieval world. These economic activities were crucial for the survival and development of medieval villages, ensuring a flow of resources and goods necessary for their sustenance and growth. Religion and community life. The church's influence on daily life. The church was the central institution in medieval village life, profoundly influencing the daily routines, moral values, and social structures of the community. The village church was not only a place of worship, but also a hub for education, charity, and social cohesion. The parish priest played a crucial role, providing spiritual guidance, performing sacraments such as baptisms, marriages, and funerals, and offering counsel on moral and ethical matters. The church dictated the calendar of daily life, with prayers, masses, and religious observances punctuating the workday and marking significant life events. Daily prayers, religious festivals, and holy days. Daily prayers and religious rituals were integral to the lives of medieval villagers. The day typically began with morning prayers and ended with evening prayers, often conducted in the church or at home. The church bells regulated the villagers' day, signaling times for work, rest, and prayer. Sunday was a day of rest and obligatory church attendance, where villagers gathered for Mass, reinforcing communal bonds and shared beliefs. Religious festivals and holy days, dictated by the liturgical calendar, were eagerly anticipated events that provided breaks from the arduous routine of agricultural life. These festivals included major celebrations such as Christmas, Easter, and Pentecost, each with its own set of rituals, feasts, and community activities. Saints' feast days were also celebrated, often with processions, special masses, and communal feasting, reflecting the deep veneration of saints as protectors and patrons of the community. Role of monasteries. Monasteries played a significant role in the spiritual and economic life of medieval villages. Often located near or within villages, monasteries were centers of learning, charity, and agricultural innovation. Monks and nuns dedicated their lives to prayer, work, and study, adhering to strict religious rules and routines. Monasteries provided education to children, medical care to the sick, and hospitality to travelers and the poor. They were also involved in agricultural production, managing large estates, and introducing advanced farming techniques that benefited the surrounding communities. The presence of a monastery could elevate a village's status and prosperity. Monastic scribes preserved religious and secular knowledge, contributing to the cultural and intellectual life of the region. Monasteries also acted as centers of economic activity, producing goods such as cheese, wine, and wool, which were traded locally and beyond. Their influence extended to spiritual life, offering retreats, spiritual direction, and opportunities for lay people to participate in religious devotions, community gatherings, and social activities. Community life in a medieval village was marked by regular gatherings and social activities that fostered unity and cooperation. These gatherings often centered around the church and religious observances, but also included secular events such as fairs, markets, and seasonal festivals. Weddings, baptisms, and other life milestones were communal affairs, celebrated with feasting, dancing, and music, bringing villagers together in joy and solidarity. Village meetings, held to discuss communal issues and governance, were essential for maintaining order and addressing concerns collectively. These meetings were often convened by the lord or the village elders, where matters such as the management of common lands, agricultural practices, and local disputes were discussed and resolved. Social activities like feasts, games, and traditional dances provided entertainment and reinforced communal bonds, making the village a tightly knit community. Superstitions and folk beliefs. Superstitions and folk beliefs were deeply embedded in the fabric of medieval village life, reflecting a blend of Christian teachings and ancient pagan traditions. Villagers held a variety of beliefs and practices aimed at protecting themselves from misfortune, illness, and evil spirits. Charms, amulets, and rituals were commonly used to ward off bad luck and ensure good harvests, healthy livestock, and personal well-being. Belief in the supernatural was prevalent, with legends of fairies, witches, and other mystical creatures influencing daily life. These folk beliefs were often intertwined with religious practices, as villagers sought the intercession of saints and the Virgin Mary to protect them from harm. Seasonal rituals, such as May Day celebrations and harvest festivals, incorporated elements of these ancient traditions, providing a sense of continuity and connection to the natural world. The Church, while often disapproving of superstitions, tolerated many of these practices, recognizing their importance in the villagers' cultural identity. The blending of religious and folk beliefs created a rich tapestry of customs and traditions that defined the spiritual and communal life of medieval villages, illustrating the complex interplay between faith, culture, and daily existence. Food and drink. Common crops and food sources. Agriculture was the primary source of food in a medieval village, with the cultivation of common crops forming the basis of the diet. Staple crops included grains such as wheat, barley, oats, and rye, which were ground into flour for bread, the cornerstone of the medieval diet. Vegetables like cabbages, onions, leeks, beans, peas, and root crops such as turnips and carrots were grown in household gardens. Fruits, including apples, pears, and plums, were also cultivated and gathered from orchards. Livestock provided essential protein sources, with villagers raising cattle, sheep, pigs, chickens, and goats. Meat consumption was relatively infrequent for peasants, with most animal products used for milk, cheese, and eggs. Fish, both from local rivers and preserved through salting or smoking, supplemented the diet, especially during religious fasting periods when meat consumption was restricted. Wild foods, such as nuts, berries, and edible plants, were foraged to complement cultivated produce. Typical meals and dietary habits and special dishes. The daily diet of medieval villagers was simple and heavily reliant on bread, porridge, and vegetable-based dishes. Breakfast typically consisted of bread with ale or water, occasionally accompanied by cheese or cold leftovers. The main meal of the day, eaten around midday, often featured pottage, a thick stew made from vegetables, grains, and sometimes meat or fish. This was usually followed by bread and ale. The evening meal was lighter, often similar to breakfast, with bread, cheese, and small portions of meat or fish if available. Special dishes were prepared for feast days and special occasions, using more luxurious ingredients such as spices, honey, and larger portions of meat. Pies, tarts, and roasted meats were common during festive times, showcasing the village's ability to celebrate and indulge despite the simplicity of daily fare. These special meals were a welcome break from the monotonous diet and reflected the community's resourcefulness and culinary skills. Brewing and consumption of ale and mead ale was the most common beverage in medieval villages, consumed daily by all members of the community, including children. Water was often unsafe to drink due to contamination, making ale a safer alternative. Brewed from barley, water, and sometimes flavored with herbs, ale was mildly alcoholic and provided essential calories and nutrients. Brewing was primarily a domestic activity, with households brewing their own ale for daily consumption. Mead, made from fermented honey and water, was another popular beverage, particularly during special occasions and feasts. Its sweeter taste and higher alcohol content made it a favored drink for celebrations. The brewing of ale and mead was not only a practical necessity, but also a social activity, fostering communal ties as villagers shared recipes, techniques, and the final products. Feast days and special occasions. Feast days and special occasions were important events in medieval village life, marked by communal meals, music, dancing, and other festivities. Religious holidays, such as Christmas, Easter, and Saints' feast days, provided opportunities for the entire community to gather and celebrate. These events were characterized by elaborate meals featuring roasted meats, pies, sweet pastries, and special dishes prepared from treasured ingredients. Weddings, baptisms, and other significant life events were also celebrated with feasts. The preparation for these occasions often involved the entire village, with families contributing food, drink, and labor to ensure a memorable event. Feasts allowed villagers to strengthen social bonds, express gratitude, and enjoy a temporary reprieve from the rigors of daily life. Feasts, famine, and food preservation. While feast days were times of abundance, medieval villagers also faced periods of scarcity and famine. Poor harvests, harsh winters, and disease could lead to food shortages, making food preservation techniques crucial for survival. Salting, smoking, drying, and pickling were common methods used to extend the shelf life of meat, fish, and vegetables. Grains were stored in granaries, and root vegetables were kept in cool, dark cellars to prevent spoilage. Famine was a constant threat, and villagers relied on communal solidarity to endure difficult times. Sharing resources, redistributing food, and providing charity through the church were essential practices that helped mitigate the impact of food shortages. These strategies reflected the community's resilience and the importance of cooperation in ensuring collective survival. The interplay between feast and famine shaped the dietary habits and food culture of medieval villages. While everyday meals were simple and utilitarian, special occasions allowed for indulgence and celebration, reinforcing the social and cultural fabric of village life. The ability to preserve and manage food resources was a testament to the villagers' ingenuity and adaptability in the face of ever-present challenges. Housing and architecture, construction of homes, materials and methods. The construction of homes in a medieval village varied significantly based on the availability of local materials, the wealth of the inhabitants, and regional building traditions. Most peasant homes were built using readily available natural resources. Common materials included wood, wattle, and daub, a combination of woven wooden strips covered with a mixture of mud, straw, and animal dung, and thatch for roofing. Stone was used more rarely, mainly for more permanent structures or homes of wealthier villagers. The construction process was typically a communal effort, with villagers helping each other to build and repair homes. The framework of a house was usually made of timber, with walls filled in using wattle and daub. Roofs were constructed with wooden beams and covered with thatch or, less commonly, wooden shingles or tiles. The floors were often dirt, although wealthier homes might have had wooden or stone flooring. Materials and techniques used. The primary materials used in medieval village construction were wood, thatch, and stone. Wood was abundant and used for framing, flooring, and roofing. Timber framing involved constructing a skeleton of wooden beams, which provided the structural support for the building. This method was efficient and adaptable, allowing for the construction of various building sizes and shapes. Wattle and daub was a versatile and insulating wall building technique. It involved weaving a lattice of wooden strips, wattle, and coating it with a sticky mixture of clay, straw, and animal dung, daub. This method was cost-effective and provided reasonable protection against the elements. Thatch, made from straw or reeds, was a common roofing material due to its availability and excellent insulating properties. However, it required regular maintenance and was highly flammable. Stone was less commonly used by peasants due to its expense and the labor-intensive process of quarrying and transporting it. When used, it provided greater durability and protection, making it a preferred material for more substantial structures such as churches, manorial buildings, and homes of the wealthier class. Interior layout and daily living spaces. The interior layout of a peasant home was typically simple and functional, designed to accommodate daily activities and the needs of the household. Most homes consisted of a single room that served multiple purposes, including cooking, eating, sleeping, and socializing. This central room often featured a hearth or open fire for cooking and heating, with smoke escaping through a hole in the roof or a simple chimney. Furniture was sparse and utilitarian, often handmade from local wood. Typical furnishings included benches, stools, tables, and storage chests. Beds were usually made of wooden frames with straw or feather mattresses. Household items such as cooking pots, utensils, and tools were stored within easy reach. The walls might be adorned with woven hangings or simple decorations to provide some comfort and aesthetic appeal. In wealthier homes, the interior layout was more complex, with multiple rooms serving specific functions. Separate spaces for cooking, dining, and sleeping provided greater comfort and privacy. These homes might also feature a second story or loft area for additional storage or sleeping quarters. Differences between peasant and noble homes. The differences between peasant and noble homes were stark, reflecting the vast disparity in wealth and social status. Peasant homes were modest, built with practical, inexpensive materials, and designed to meet the basic needs of the inhabitants. They were often small, with a single room serving multiple purposes, and lacked many of the comforts and conveniences found in wealthier homes. Noble homes, by contrast, were grand and imposing, built to display wealth and power. These homes, often referred to as manors or manor houses, were constructed with high-quality materials, such as stone, and featured more elaborate architectural designs. They included multiple rooms and floors, with dedicated spaces for various activities and private chambers for the lord and his family. The interiors of noble homes were richly furnished and decorated with tapestries, fine furniture, and ornamental items. These homes had better amenities, including more advanced heating systems, private chapels, and sometimes even rudimentary plumbing. Noble residences also included defensive features such as thick walls, fortified gates, and towers, reflecting their dual role as homes and strongholds. Clothing and fashion materials and methods of clothing. Production. Clothing production in medieval villages relied on locally sourced materials and traditional crafting methods. Wool was the most common material, as sheep farming was widespread and wool was durable and versatile. Flax was also cultivated for linen, used for lighter garments and underclothes. The process of clothing production began with shearing sheep for wool or harvesting flax for linen fibers. Wool was washed, carded, and spun into yarn, while flax fibers were retted, spun, and woven into fabric. Spinning and weaving were typically women's work, done at home using spinning wheels and simple looms. The woven fabric was then dyed using natural dyes derived from plants, minerals, and insects, producing a range of colors, although muted earth tones were most common due to the limitations of natural dyes. After dyeing, the fabric was cut and sewn into garments using needles and thread, often crafted from bone or metal. Typical garments for different social classes. Clothing varied significantly between social classes, reflecting the wearer's status and wealth. Peasants wore simple, functional garments made from coarse wool or linen. Men typically wore tunics, which reached to the knees, belted at the waist, and paired with hose or trousers. Women wore long gowns with fitted bodices and full skirts, often layered with aprons and shawls. Both men and women wore cloaks or mantles for additional warmth and protection from the elements. In contrast, the nobility dressed in more elaborate and finely made garments. Noblemen wore tailored tunics, sometimes adorned with embroidery or fur, and hose made from finer materials. They also wore surcoats or tabards over their tunics. Noble women's clothing included fitted gowns made from luxurious fabrics such as silk or fine wool, often embellished with intricate embroidery, lace, and fur trims. They also wore veils or elaborate headdresses. Seasonal and functional variations. Clothing varied with the seasons to provide comfort and protection against the weather. In winter, villagers wore multiple layers of woolen garments, including thicker cloaks, hoods, and mittens to keep warm. Fur-lined clothing and sheepskin garments were also used for additional insulation. Footwear was made from leather, often lined with fur or wool for warmth. During warmer months, lighter linen garments replaced heavier woolen clothes. Tunics and gowns were shorter and less layered, allowing for better ventilation. Straw hats and linen coifs were worn to protect from the sun, and shoes were made from lighter leather or even woven materials. Functional clothing was essential for different types of work. For instance, agricultural laborers wore sturdy, practical clothing that could withstand hard work and rough conditions. Craftsmen and artisans had specialized garments suited to their trades, such as aprons, gloves, and protective headgear. Accessories, personal adornment, jewelry, and personal grooming accessories and personal adornment were important aspects of medieval fashion, reflecting both functional needs and social status. Belts and girdles were essential, used to secure tunics and gowns and often adorned with pouches or tools. Hats and headgear varied widely, from simple linen caps and hoods worn by peasants to elaborate decorated hats and veils for the nobility. Jewelry was a key indicator of wealth and status. Peasants wore minimal jewelry, often simple metal pieces like brooches or pins. In contrast, the nobility adorned themselves with gold and silver jewelry, set with precious stones. Rings, necklaces, bracelets, and elaborate brooches were common among the wealthy, often serving as symbols of family heritage or allegiance. Personal grooming also varied by class. Peasants maintained basic hygiene with limited resources, using soap made from animal fat and ashes, and brushing their hair with simple combs. Nobles, however, had access to a wider range of grooming tools and cosmetics. They used scented oils, herbal rinses, and more sophisticated grooming implements, such as metal combs and scissors. Wealthy women often styled their hair in intricate fashions and used cosmetics made from natural ingredients to enhance their appearance. Health and medicine. Common diseases and medical conditions. Medieval villagers faced a variety of diseases and medical conditions, often exacerbated by poor living conditions, inadequate nutrition, and lack of sanitation. Common ailments included respiratory infections, gastrointestinal diseases, and skin conditions such as boils and rashes. Malnutrition and related deficiencies were widespread, leading to conditions like scurvy, vitamin C deficiency, and rickets, vitamin D deficiency. Infectious diseases were a constant threat. Smallpox, dysentery, tuberculosis, and influenza were prevalent, often spreading rapidly through close-knit communities. Parasites, including lice and intestinal worms, were also common due to poor hygiene practices. Injuries from agricultural work or accidents were frequent and could lead to serious infections without proper medical care. Herbal remedies and folk medicine. In the absence of advanced medical knowledge and professional health care, villagers relied heavily on herbal remedies and folk medicine. Knowledge of medicinal plants and their uses was passed down through generations, forming a vital part of the community's healthcare practices. Commonly used herbs included chamomile for its calming effects, garlic for its antibacterial properties, and willow bark for pain relief, containing salicin, a precursor to aspirin. Folk medicine also involved various rituals and superstitions aimed at healing and protection. Amulets, charms, and incantations were often used in conjunction with herbal treatments. Remedies were tailored to address specific ailments, and villagers sought the guidance of local healers or wise women who were well versed in the properties of medicinal plants and traditional healing practices. Role of the village healer or apothecary. The village healer or apothecary played a crucial role in maintaining the health of the community. These individuals, often women, possessed extensive knowledge of herbal medicine and traditional healing techniques. They prepared remedies, treated common illnesses, and provided advice on health and wellness. The healer's home often served as a makeshift clinic where villagers could seek treatment for various ailments. In addition to treating physical conditions, the village healer also addressed spiritual and emotional health, recognizing the interconnectedness of mind, body, and spirit. They performed rituals to ward off evil spirits, offered prayers, and provided comfort and counsel to the sick and their families. Their role was both medical and spiritual, blending practical knowledge with cultural beliefs and practices. Impact of the Black Death and other epidemics. The Black Death, which swept through Europe in the mid-14th century, had a devastating impact on medieval villages. This pandemic, caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, is estimated to have killed between 30% and 60% of Europe's population. The disease spread rapidly through fleas carried by rats, causing symptoms such as fever, chills, vomiting, and painful swellings called buboes. The sheer speed and mortality of the disease overwhelmed communities and medical practitioners alike. The Black Death led to significant social and economic upheaval. With a substantial portion of the population dead, labor shortages ensued, disrupting agricultural production and leading to food shortages. Entire villages were abandoned, and the fear and uncertainty surrounding the disease led to widespread panic and persecution, including the scapegoating of minority groups. Other epidemics, such as waves of influenza and smallpox, also periodically swept through villages, compounding the challenges of medieval healthcare. Each outbreak tested the resilience of communities, highlighting the limitations of contemporary medical knowledge and the importance of communal support and traditional healing practices. Law and order village justice system and common crimes. The justice system in medieval villages was an integral part of maintaining order and resolving disputes. Village justice was typically overseen by the manorial court, which was presided over by the lord of the manor or his appointed steward. These courts handled a variety of issues, including disputes over land, breaches of customary law, and minor criminal offenses. Common crimes in medieval villages included theft, assault, poaching, and breaches of local regulations, such as grazing rights and property boundaries. The manorial court operated on a combination of customary law, which was based on long-standing traditions and practices, and the feudal obligations that bound the villagers to their lord. The court was a communal affair, with local villagers often participating as jurors or witnesses. Justice was not only about punishment, but also about maintaining social harmony and upholding the community's collective values. Punishments and their administration. Punishments for crimes in medieval villages varied depending on the severity of the offense and the social status of the offender. For minor offenses, Punishments often included fines, which could be paid in money or goods. Public humiliation was another common form of punishment. Offenders might be put in the stocks, pilloried, or subjected to other forms of public disgrace to deter others from committing similar crimes. More serious offenses could result in harsher punishments, such as corporal punishment, including whipping or branding. In extreme cases, particularly for crimes like murder or repeated theft, capital punishment could be administered, often by hanging. The administration of these punishments was designed to be swift and public, serving as a deterrent to others and reinforcing the authority of the manorial court. Role of the constable and local officials. The village constable was a key figure in maintaining law and order. Appointed by the lord of the manor or elected by the villagers, the constable's duties included overseeing the implementation of court decisions, maintaining public order, and organizing the local militia when necessary. The constable also acted as the chief law enforcement officer, responsible for arresting offenders and bringing them before the manorial court. Local officials, such as the reeve, an overseer of the manor's lands, and the beadle, a minor official who carried out various administrative tasks, supported the constable in his duties. These officials ensured that the village ran smoothly, managing agricultural production, collecting rents and taxes, and overseeing the maintenance of communal resources. Their roles were essential in the everyday administration of village life, blending legal, economic, and social responsibilities, dispute resolution, and conflict management. Dispute resolution in medieval villages relied heavily on mediation and arbitration, aiming to resolve conflicts before they escalated into serious legal matters. The manorial court served as the primary venue for formal dispute resolution, but many conflicts were settled informally within the community. Elders, respected community members, and local officials often mediated disputes, seeking solutions that were acceptable to all parties involved. Common disputes included issues over land boundaries, inheritance, and the use of communal resources. The emphasis was on restoring harmony and ensuring that the village continued to function cohesively. In some cases, disputes were resolved through compensation, with one party agreeing to pay damages to the other. Community pressure and the desire to maintain social standing often encouraged villagers to settle their differences amicably. Conflict management also involved preventative measures, such as the establishment of clear rules and regulations governing village life. Regular village meetings allowed residents to voice concerns and grievances, promoting transparency and collective decision-making. These practices help to minimize conflicts and reinforce a sense of communal responsibility and mutual support. Conclusion. Medieval villages were the heart of rural life, defined by their social structures, agricultural economy, religious practices, and communal living. These communities were shaped by the feudal system, local governance, and a deep connection to the land and each other. The legacy of medieval villages persists in modern rural traditions and local governance structures, reflecting the enduring human need for community and cooperation. Examining life in medieval villages offers a profound reflection on human resilience, ingenuity, and the social bonds that sustain communities through both prosperity and hardship.